Hello everyone, Mutsuki Yukou, the Solid Exarch here. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded a video for you guys, and don't worry, I'm definitely working on rectifying that soon. I have a couple of videos in the works, including a big discussion video about my thoughts on the ending of Endwalker, as well as some lore videos. But in the meantime, I wanted to do something just a little bit different today. This is a story written by me from the point of view of my Warrior of Light, Mutsuki Yukou. I will be reading the story like an audiobook with accompanying background visuals where possible. It's something pretty different from my normal content, but I still hope you guys enjoy, and I hope it holds you over until my next videos. Without further ado, let's begin. The day started just like any other. I remember waking up in the mizzenmast, head still groggy from a night of drinking downstairs. The sun had long since risen, and I was sure that if I had been back at the Rising Stones, I would have been scolded by one of the more dutiful scions there. The Rising Stones. Although I had a house, and frequently stayed at any number of inn-rooms across the realm, that place more than any had been like a home to me. Of course, now, with the scions quote-unquote disbanding, I could hardly loiter there without drawing undue suspicion. Before I could get caught up in my memories, however, a small glint out of the corner of my eye brought my attention to my link pearl. It was flashing with a warm light, indicating I had received a message in my sleep. I quickly slipped it in my ear and held a finger up to it, replaying the message. "Pray forgive mine untimely message," it began. It was Urianger. "If thou art otherwise preoccupied with thy many adventures, disregard my meagre request. It is not of great import. However, should thou find the time, pray meet me in Thancred at Thalmazin. I have a task that thou might find greater success in than us." My curiosity piqued, and not one to pass up a request from any of the scions, I made a quick journey to Old Charlian. If I had known then what accepting Urianger's summons was going to net me in the long term, I may very well have ignored the request. Yet with not a single ons of foreboding weighing me down, I headed to the lower levels where Thalmazin was, and found Urianger and Thancred standing before the great starship that had carried us to the ends of the universe itself. "Ah, well met, Mutsuki," Thancred smiled. "It feels like it's been too long." I nodded. "Indeed. Before I came here, I found myself getting a bit nostalgic for the Rising Stones." Urianger responded in kind. "Aye, I find mine own thoughts oft wander to our times in Mordona, however brief mine own time there was." "Ah yes," Thancred nodded, crossing his arms. "Often sulking about in the waking sands by yourself, if I recall. Well, I suppose we've all gone our own ways for now." "Verily, though, if I may have thine attention," Urianger turned to me, presenting an old, tattered paper. "Pray forgive me for interrupting thine reminiscence, but mine summons were to do with this. By mere chance was it that I happened upon this parchment. Upon it thou shalt find a script that is, to my knowledge, totally unfamiliar. Mine own understanding of ancient language and prophecy is not insignificant, and yet this script remaineth indecipherable." "Of course, we don't expect you to translate it yourself," Thancred pointed out. "But out of all of us, it is you who have traveled the world countless times. If anyone would know someone who might be able to read this, we figured it would be you." I hesitated for a moment. I didn't have the slightest idea who would be able to translate this. "If even thou hast not the slightest inclination of this mystifying script, at the very least, wouldst thou deliver this script unto Y'shtola? Master Matoya's access to the great Google library mayhap provideth the answer." I immediately perked up at the thought. I had visited Y'shtola quite frequently, even after the scions publicly dissolved, but I was not one to pass up another trip, and this one with a more solid excuse, instead of my thinly veiled attempts to avoid outright admitting that I missed her. "Leave it to me," I replied, grinning. Urianger and Thancred glanced at each other briefly before nodding. "Here's the parchment," Thancred nodded. "Good luck." I waved goodbye to Urianger and Thancred, but my mind was pulled back to the strange glance the two shared. Had I been less excited to visit Y'shtola, it might have given me pause. At that moment, however, I was just eager to visit my fellow Mikote scion. I traveled from Charlian to Idleshire, and made the journey out to Matoya's cave, cursing her decision to live away from the city. It made my many visits to the cave somewhat tedious, though only inconvenient rather than arduous. Upon arriving, I was greeted with the familiar grumpy scowl of Master Matoya. "Back again already? If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were planning on moving in here." No, I held up my hands defensively. though, admittedly, the thought of moving in with Y'shtola brought a blush to my face. I'm actually here for a reason. Urianger and Thancred asked for some help deciphering the strange language on this parchment. They suggested I start here first. I presented the parchment to Matoya, who narrowed her eyes as she stared down at the odd script. "And you say it was Urianger who gave you this paper?" Matoya asked. "Yes." "That boy," I heard Matoya mumble, certainly more to herself than to me. "Well, I can't read it, but I assume it wasn't my help you were looking for in the first place. My old student is over there towards the back of the cave. Don't enjoy yourselves too much." Awkwardly trying to ignore Matoya's teasing, I glanced at where Y'shtola was standing and headed over to her. "Oh, Mutsuki," she smiled, noticing me. "Hey, Y'shtola. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. You look like you were concentrating." "Oh no," she replied. "Actually, I needed a bit of a break. I've had my head buried in these tomes for gods know how long. What brings you here today?" I presented to her the parchment. Urianger and Thancred asked me to decipher this, but I haven't the faintest idea where to start. Y'shtola placed her chin in her hand and studied the script closely. "Well, I don't recognize it, but I do recall seeing a tome of glyphs and runes in the Gooba library. I've been in there frequently, keeping the denizens at bay, so retrieving it should be a rather trivial matter." "Sounds good," I replied. "Shall we go then?" The travel through the library was brief, and aside from having to fight off a few errant enchanted books, we managed to find the book Y'shtola had been talking about. It was a large encyclopedia of all the realm's writing systems, at least the ones known by the Sharlayans at the time of its writing. Seeing as Y'shtola had been buried in books all day, I offered to pour through it while we both enjoyed some tea and idle chatter. After going through the book thrice, however, I slumped my shoulders. "No luck?" Y'shtola asked. "No, it doesn't appear to be in here," I said, defeatedly. Very odd." Y'shtola studied the parchment again. She asked for the book and I handed it to her. After skimming for only a few moments, she placed the book down in front of me. "It's not exactly the same, but it is reminiscent of an old Muricidian script, at least in style." "Hey!" My eyes lit up. "Maybe Graha has an idea of what it could be, seeing as the Allagans studied the Muricidians extensively during the war." "If it is Muricidian, then surely the Crystal Tower would have had information on it," Y'shtola pointed out. "I think asking Graha is a great idea." I grinned. "Thanks for all the help, Y'shtola, and the tea was fantastic too." Y'shtola smiled. "Safe travels, and if you finish your task early, you can always join me for another cup. Matoya might groan about it, but I know she doesn't mind you around, and I myself quite enjoy your company." "I would love to," I responded, before heading off to my next destination. I found myself traveling back to Old Sharlayan, to the main hall in the Baldesian Annex, where Graha and Cryo were standing, talking about something or other. They heard me enter and turned around to face me. "Mutsuki, what a pleasant surprise!" Cryo smiled. Graha's face lit up upon seeing me. "Well met, my friend. What brings you to this corner of the realm?" I quickly explained to them the situation. I told them about the parchment, inscribed with the mysterious characters, which we had discovered were not unlike an old Muricidian script. Instantly, Graha's ears perked up. "Well, glad I am that you thought of me upon realizing the similarities between this mystery writing and the characters of old Muricidian," Graha smiled. "It's true. I have definitely seen writing similar to this documented in the Crystal Tower's records." "Ah, Mutsuki retains the ability to travel to the First, does she not? Perhaps you can go there to unlock the secrets of these elusive symbols," Cryo chimed in. Graha shook his head. "No need. These characters are also well documented right here, in Sharlayan. The Nomenon has but a single tome that documents this particular writing. Perhaps this is why it eluded Urianger and Thancred's combined efforts." Cryo frowned. "I find it quite odd that our associates, especially Urianger, would so carelessly overlook a tome of such import. Though, I do suppose it's possible the book was being perused by some other scholar during their search, if you say there is but one." Graha nodded, placing his hand to his chin in contemplation. "Yes, it must be the case that someone else had borrowed it during the duration of their search. If it's still unaccounted for, I'm afraid a trip to the First might be necessary. But, assuming it's not, I do distinctly recall the location of the tome. I can write it down for you, Mutsuki, and you can go check for yourself before making an unnecessary trip beyond the rift." Graha scribbled the location on a piece of scrap parchment and handed it to me. "Good luck on your search, as well as your studies. I've heard you've been making a concerted effort to study the history of this realm, to join our ranks as an Archon. I wish you only the best of luck, my friend, G'raha smiled. Indeed. While you may face some adversity from the Forum trying to achieve the rank officially, I will fight tooth and nail to petition for your recognition when the time comes. A sentiment undoubtedly shared by the other Scions, Kryl added. Now, off you go. Here's hoping that tome is back where it should be. I smiled at the encouraging words, and waved goodbye as I headed off towards the Nomenon. It had been a place I had become quite familiar with in the past months. As mentioned, after the Scions disbanded, at least officially, I had chosen to pursue a path that many of my associates had walked before me, becoming an Archon. Such a thing would have been all but impossible for an outsider to Sharlayan before we had saved the world from the final days, but many political changes and more open policies had made the goal much more in reach. My best bet was to study independently outside of the studium, and write a thesis on my subject of choice, in this case, the history of the realm, to be recognized as an Archon. I had no idea if it was possible, but I had been studying hard, with considerable help from the other Scions, particularly Y'shtola and G'raha, to achieve such a goal. I entered the library, taking in the smell of old tomes and candlelight, a scent that had become less imposing and more comforting over the months of my studies. I headed straight for the section G'raha had marked out, and soon enough I began perusing the shelves. It took me quite some time to find the book I was looking for, in no small part because I got distracted at least thrice. There was a fascinating book discussing the history of the Calamities, which were equal parts fascinating as well as deeply saddening, knowing that each one marked the death of an entire shard. There was another book talking about the history of cuisine in early Eorzea, which only served to make me hungry. Another book was a seemingly unhinged conspiracy regarding Hydaelyn, something that, with my knowledge, I knew to be wholly inaccurate. Finally, I found it. The book containing the history of Mericidia. The first section of the book heavily documented the various writing systems native to the continent over the years. I immediately started searching for anything pre-Fourth Umbral Era. Sure enough, there were translations, clear as day, on one of the pages, documenting the writing system and its alphabet. Finally, I beamed in triumph. I quickly got to work deciphering the runes, but came away completely confused. Upon the parchment was a single word, but translated, it was nonsense. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I just don't get it, I cried out in frustration, only to receive glares from the other patrons of the Nomenon. I forgot I was in a library. Shrinking down, I wrote down the translation and checked out the tome for good measure, in case I had managed to mistranslate something. Before long, I found myself heading back to Thalmazin, where I found Urianger and Thancred, seemingly waiting for me expectantly. Well, how fared your search? Thancred asked. Were you able to translate the script? Yes. Kind of, I replied. I explained to them the journey I had been on, from asking Y'shtola, to our trek through the Great Gooba Library, to reaching out to G'raha, to my search in the Nomenon. Curiously, with each passing second, I saw the two cast wry glances at one another, and they seemed to be getting more and more excited as I continued to explain. In the end, I managed to translate the symbols, I replied. But it's nonsense. I just don't get it. Is it some sort of ancient spell or something? What is Ligma? In that moment, simultaneously, I saw the glint in both Thancred and Urianger's eyes. In sync, the two shouted loud enough for the rest of the esteemed halls of the Thalmazin to hear. Ligma Balls! April Fools! For those of you who made it through the video, thank you guys so much for watching. This was a little fun April Fool's joke to hold you guys over until I finish my more serious videos. I know I mentioned it at the beginning of the video, but I'm sorry for not being very active lately. Not to get too personal here, but I went through a bit of a rough spot and wound up taking an extended, unannounced break. But I'm back now, and I'm really excited for what I have planned. Also, friendly reminder that I am a VTuber, and I do stream over on Twitch. Lately, I haven't been streaming Final Fantasy XIV, but I've been streaming a variety of other games. I've been streaming more consistently lately, and things do get a bit fun and chaotic, so I would really appreciate you guys checking me out over there if you're interested. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I really do hope you enjoyed the video. It was a bit different from what I normally do on this channel, but it was also an April Fool's joke, so do let me know what you guys think. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed, drop any comments down below, and subscribe if you want more Final Fantasy XIV content from me. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.